The Bible. It's a collection of ancient texts, prophecies, poetry, history, and letters. It holds stories of kings, shepherds, wars, and miracles. But for many, the Bible remains an unopened mystery. Here at The Bible Explained, we're not just reading verses, we're exploring the cultural bedrock and the dramatic narrative woven through its 66 books. Hit that subscribe button and let the journey begin.
Today, we are diving into one of the most profound, honestly, one of the most disturbing and influential stories ever told. It's a story that sits right at the very heart of three world religions, and for thousands of years, it has forced people, believers and philosophers alike, to wrestle with this terrifying collision of faith, morality, and divine will. This is the story of the binding of Isaac.
Right away, the command from God to Abraham is just chilling. It's delivered with this cold, calculated precision. Just listen to the language. Your son. Then it gets worse. Your only son. And finally, whom you love. Each phrase is like another turn of the screw, right? It's deliberately designed to intensify the horror and to hammer home the irreplaceable value of what's being demanded. This isn't just any sacrifice. It is the sacrifice of the entire future that God himself had promised.
And that, of course, brings us to the central, agonizing question that has echoed through history ever since. It's a question that really challenges the very nature of God, the absolute limits of faith, and the very foundation of our ethics. It's the paradox we're here to try and unpack today. So, before we can even begin to explore all the different layers of interpretation, we first have to grapple with the raw story itself. The text in Genesis is incredibly stark. It's lean, and it's filled with what you can only describe as a deafening silence that just forces us, the readers, to confront the sheer psychological weight of this moment. Okay, so here's the core theological problem. This command, it doesn't just ask for a sacrifice. It directly contradicts God's own covenant. See, God had explicitly promised Abraham that his legacy, his entire people, would flow through Isaac. So Abraham is now caught between two divine decrees, the promise of a future and the command to completely destroy it. So for him to obey, it requires a level of trust that is, well, it's almost unimaginable. And the journey takes 3 days, 3 long days of silence. The text gives us almost no insight into what Abraham is thinking, creating what a lot of scholars call an emotional vacuum. Now, think about this. This is the same Abraham who argued passionately with God to save the city of Sodom. But here, there's no argument. There's just this quiet, agonizing obedience, which leaves us to fill in the blanks of his internal torment. And then the tension just breaks with this single, heart-stopping, innocent question from Isaac. He sees all the pieces for the ritual, except the most important one. This one line is really the peak of the story's psychological drama. Everything that's not being said just hangs heavy in the air. Abraham's response? Well, it's a masterclass in both ambiguity and faith. On one hand, you could see it as a way to soothe his son, to put him at ease. But on the other, it becomes a profound prophecy. Abraham actually names the place, "The Lord will provide," and he transforms the site from one of human sacrifice into a monument of divine intervention. And his faith is rewarded, because God does in fact provide a ram caught in the thicket. Now, this single event doesn't just belong to one tradition. It's so foundational, it becomes a cornerstone for Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But, and this is key, each faith reads the story through its own unique lens, and that leads to some dramatically different conclusions. So first, let's get some key terms down. In Judaism, the story is called the Akedah, which means the binding. This is so important because the focus is on the act of binding Isaac, not the act of killing him. In Islam, it's known as the Zabaha, or the sacrifice, which really emphasizes the test of utter devotion. Now, here is probably the most fundamental difference between the accounts: the identity of the son. Judaism and Christianity both identify the son as Isaac, the child of promise born to Sarah. But the dominant view in Islam is that the son was actually Ishmael, Abraham's firstborn son through Hagar. This one change, as you can imagine, has massive theological implications. And that difference in who the son was leads directly to a difference in geography. The Judeo-Christian tradition places the event on Mount Moriah, the future site of the temple in Jerusalem, making it the sacred center. The Islamic tradition, on the other hand, places the sacrifice near Mecca, linking it directly to the rituals of the Hajj pilgrimage and establishing its own sacred center. So let's just break this down. For Judaism, the purpose is to turn Abraham's faith into actual earned merit, called zechut, and the big takeaway is God's definitive rejection of human sacrifice. For Christianity, the entire event is a prefigurement, a foreshadowing of Jesus' sacrifice, with Jesus becoming the ultimate Lamb of God. And for Islam, the purpose is to demonstrate total submission, which is literally the meaning of the word Islam, and the outcome is the establishment of the Eid al-Adha festival, the festival of the sacrifice. To really get the Jewish perspective, though, we need to dig a little deeper into the theology of the test itself. I mean, what's the point of a test if God is all-knowing? He already knows the outcome, right? Well, the answer lies in the Hebrew word nisayon. So a nisayon isn't for God's benefit. It's not like God is sitting there with a clipboard wondering, I wonder what Abraham will do. No, God already knows what's in Abraham's heart. The test is for Abraham's benefit. It's a chance for him to take an inner potential quality, like his faith or his fear of God, and to transform it into a real, tangible outward action. So the process kind of looks like this. It starts with a potential, something inside a person. Then the test comes along and forces a choice. The person then has to take action through what you might call religious toil and exertion, and it's through that action that the potential becomes actual. The virtue is no longer just a feeling, it's a proven fact. It's a completed merit that has real power in the world. And, the binding of Isaac wasn't just some random event. Jewish tradition holds that this was the 10th and final test for Abraham. This whole series of 10 trials was like a divine curriculum, specifically designed to forge his character, perfect his faith, and transform him from Avram, the son of an idolmaker, into Abraham, the spiritual father of an entire people. Okay, now let's widen our lens one last time. This story has become a primary case study for philosophy. It's created this timeless battlefield where the absolute demand of faith clashes head-on with the universal laws of human morality. The question is this: is it ever right to do something morally wrong just because you believe God told you to? For the great philosopher Immanuel Kant, the answer is a hard no. Absolutely not. He argued that we can know just through pure reason that killing an innocent child is wrong, period. This is a universal moral law. So any voice, even one that sounds exactly like God, commanding you to violate that law cannot be from God. It has to be a delusion. For Kant, reason always comes first. But then you have Søren Kierkegaard, who saw it completely differently. He called Abraham a knight of faith, precisely because he was willing to make a leap beyond reason. Kierkegaard said that true faith sometimes requires a teleological suspension of the ethical, which is a fancy way of saying there are moments where your personal absolute duty to God forces you to suspend the universal moral rules that apply to everyone else. For Kierkegaard, Abraham isn't a murderer. He is a hero of faith. And then, much later, comes Emmanuel Levinas with this really powerful synthesis. He argued that both Kant and Kierkegaard kind of missed the point. For Levinas, our main encounter with God happens through our ethical responsibility to other people. So the real voice of God wasn't that first command to sacrifice Isaac. It was the silent, ethical command coming from the vulnerable face of Isaac himself, a command that says, do not kill. The angel who stops Abraham is really just giving voice to this fundamental ethical demand that was there all along. So, after navigating the story, the different religions, and all the philosophies, where does that leave us? Why does this ancient, frankly troubling story continue to hold such power over us today? Well, the legacy of the binding is just huge. Historically, it was a powerful statement against the common practice of child sacrifice in the ancient world. Theologically, it became the ultimate model for martyrdom, the foundation for ancestral merit, and a lesson that parents are stewards of their children, not their owners. And I think universally, it remains this timeless allegory for anyone who has ever had to face a choice that feels truly and utterly impossible. And that leaves us with one final question to ponder. Abraham was asked to sacrifice the thing he loved most for a principle he couldn't possibly fully understand. In our modern world, which is just filled with competing ideologies and dogmas and demands on our loyalty, this story really forces us to ask ourselves, what is the thing we would sacrifice everything for? And maybe more importantly, how do we know the voice demanding that sacrifice is true?
The Bible isn't just a history book. It's a living, challenging text. As you reflect on what we covered today regarding this topic, consider how this new context changes your reading of the verses. If you appreciated this breakdown, sharing it with just one friend who struggles with understanding the Bible is the best way you can support the channel. Subscribe for more, click here for your next explanation, and never stop seeking clarity. Until next time.